Welcome to the Daily Boogie.
Good evening. I want to give a quick briefing on the events in the committee this evening. I think we have...
The first thing to do in these situations is make sure the team is behind you. You've got to have people nodding. Okay, everyone in position. Yep, okay, good. Let's go. Let's get outraged.
Crossed a deeply regrettable line in this committee where for the first time in the 10 years or so that I've been on the committee, there was a vote to politicize the declassification process of...
A vote to politicise the declassification process. Isn't any vote on anything politicising it? Just out of curiosity.
Intelligence and potentially compromise sources and methods. I made a couple motions this afternoon or this evening.
Say, potentially compromise sources and methods. Aren't the methods the very thing that were being investigated by the House Intelligence Committee? The methods? Isn't that what the memo's dealing with? The methods that people in the FBI used to conduct surveillance? This might compromise our methods. Isn't that the bloody point? Isn't that the allegation? That the methods were in themselves politicised and potentially illegal? Isn't that the method? Well, we wouldn't want to expose our methods.
First, we scheduled the hearing today, or the business meeting, so that the minority memoranda could be made available to the members of the House that had been misled by the majority's memoranda. We expected that vote to be non-controversial, and it was. The House members will now have access to the minority memoranda. I made a secondary motion that...
Oh, see, there was all this kicking up of a stink before about you only released the Democrats' memo. You didn't release our memo. Why didn't you want to look at our memo? You got something against our memo, bro? And then he's like, well, now everyone can read it anyway. I'm sure they'll be lining up for that, right? Wonderful says it's real comedy. No, this is my worst Periscope ever. The fans have spoken.
That prior to the public release of either memoranda, that the FBI and the Department of Justice have the opportunity to come and brief the entire House in a classified session on both memoranda, on the underlying facts and the underlying materials, so that the...
I want to see the Democrat memo. Does anyone else want to see the Democrat memo? Release the memes. Let's see. Yeah, all right. Come on, Adam. I think Adam's a bit jelly because no one wants to read his memo, to be fair. Come on, Ads. Show us your memo. We'll put it up on the fridge. There you go. Yeah, very proud of you. That's a very, very good memo. But again, don't forget, guys. I mean, the Republican memo is irrelevant. It's just Republican partisan talking points. There's nothing to see here. It's completely and utterly just a partisan hack job. That's exactly why it must not be released, because it is completely irrelevant and has no bearing on nothing whatsoever.
The committee could make a responsible judgment as to whether the memoranda should be made public. That motion was voted down by the majority. The majority expressed a concern that something in the minority memoranda or otherwise
incredibly vast
could compromise sources and methods.
I don't see anyone shaking their heads in agreement. They look like zombies. There's a lot of glum. There's a lot of glum in that background there. Big eyes on the woman on the right. Yes, she's like, But again, it's just a vast right-wing conspiracy theory.
And for exactly that reason, we asked that both memoranda be vetted by the
Notice no one's talking about DACA anymore, right?
FBI and the Department of Justice, but that was voted down. I spoke with the director of the FBI earlier this afternoon. He expressed his strong interest in being able to brief our committee prior to any release of these materials about concerns that the Bureau and the Department have. I relayed that interest by the director of the FBI, a appointee of President Trump, to this committee, but that was unavailing. They were not willing to meet with the director of the FBI to hear the Bureau's concerns or the Department's concerns.
They weren't willing to meet with him. They shunned him. The director of the FBI came in and said, okay, you know, all of this stuff, I want to sit down with you and talk to you and tell you about my concerns. And it's like, mate, haven't you been in intelligence hearings, you know, on and off for the last 2 months? That's the other thing too. They're like, they didn't want to hear what the intelligence people had to say about this memo. No, it's bullshit. They had the intelligence people sat there in front of them for hours and hours and hours asking them questions about it, right? Remember? Who gave the FISA warrant? Who authorized it? Where did this money come from? What was that person doing? What about these text messages? What about this surveillance? Who presented this evidence to the FISA court? They had plenty of time to talk about what was in the memo. Well, I don't think we should talk about it. Well, I'm not at liberty to say. Well, I don't think we should release the documents. Remember, they waited 2 months to get documents? Do you remember? We should have access to these documents. No. I don't think so. Fusion GPS didn't want to play ball. Didn't want to give up their documents either. But now, all of a sudden, after all of that, after months and months of questioning and demanding answers and demanding documents and demanding information, now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, all of a sudden, when the committee votes to release their findings, no, we've got to sit down, we've got to have a talk about it. Well, I'm sorry. You had your chance. You had more than your chance. You could have put this to bed 2 months ago. 2 months ago, when all of the hearings started. They could have all marched in there and sat down and told them who presented the information to the FISA court, who wrote this, who paid Fusion GPS, what about the text messages. They could have explained all of that. They had more than ample opportunity to explain it, and they didn't. And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people are going to try and tell you that, they're going about it the wrong way. They've gone too far. They're kidding themselves. They are absolutely kidding themselves. You guys remember? Christopher Wray, Rod Rosenstein, they all sat down in front of the Intelligence Committee. The Democrats could ask questions too. They were all asked questions in an open forum, cameras rolling. They didn't hand over documents. They didn't answer questions. But now that the memo summing up the investigation, which has taken place in the public eye for the last 2 months, is about to be released. Nope. This is the end of democracy as we know it. Sorry. I don't think it's going to work. I really don't.
Instead, they voted
You might genuinely believe it, but I don't think most people will.
Against allowing their own members, as well as the members of the broader House of Representatives, to be briefed by the Department of Justice and FBI on these memoranda. Finally, I moved that if the majority was going to release their memoranda publicly, that they release the minority views as well, that they be released jointly. And the majority, on a party line basis, voted against both memoranda being released to the public. They then took up their own memoranda and voted it out to make public. We had a separate vote on the minority memoranda, and the majority voted against allowing the public to see the minority memoranda.
Yeah, it's just so unfair, isn't it? I'm going to take you back 8 months for this one.
We are joined now by the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, California Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman Schiff, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's go straight to the bottom line.
Flashback.
Do you believe President Trump tried to block the FBI investigation?
Well, it certainly sounds, if these reports are accurate, that he wanted this investigation of Michael Flynn to stop, and he was concerned about the investigation in the sense that it might lead to him, based on his own admission and the conversation he claims to have had.
Ex-FBI, that's the little subheading there. Ex-FBI director reportedly wrote memo after meeting. Let's see what Schiff thinks about memos.
With Director Comey. The bottom line, though, George, is we don't really know what took place here, and we need to find out. We need to get those notes, if they exist, that Director Comey took of this conversation and any other that
Release the memo!
Russia investigation in any way. And, of course, if the president was making a truthful claim or threat.
We need to know what's in this Comey memo. It needs to be released right now. I mean, this withholding of memos, it's got to stop. The public demand answers.
To Director Comey that he had tapes. We're going to need to get those also.
And don't forget the tapes. Got to get the tapes out there.
And I think it's only a matter of time, and probably not much time, before we see Director Comey come and testify before Congress again.
Yeah, he testified a few times and he didn't answer any questions. In fact, he said the opposite. He said, no, Trump's not under investigation. Interestingly. Oh, yeah, I know it's not the same thing. DPs, thanks for joining us. I know it's not the same thing. Of course, it's different. You know, if we have a private classified memo from the FBI in this occurrence, it should be released because it was a handwritten note after a meeting with Donald Trump that he gave to his friend, who then leaked to the press, allegedly. It's important that the people see that, okay? The handwritten note made by Director Comey after a meeting with Donald Trump, which he gave to a friend. That memo needs to be out there, and the tapes. Any tape conversations that are classified, they need to be out there. That's one thing. The other thing is a few months worth of House Intelligence Committee investigations where all of the people concerned were sat down in front of the committee and asked questions and asked for documents. They were asked to produce documents from the likes of Fusion GPS. They were asked to provide documents as to who supplied evidence to the Pfizer court, what the evidence was. They refused to do it. They got the documents anyway. They then went over those documents, thousands of them. Granted, it wasn't one handwritten memo after a meeting, after dinner, but it was thousands of official documents nonetheless. And someone has presented their findings in a 4-page memo, and that must not be released because it's different. It's different. So I understand the difference. 1, handwritten memo on the back of a handkerchief after dinner. 2, thousands and thousands of documents after months of official investigations, all held in the public eye by the House Intelligence Committee. Handwritten memo, House Intel Committee. I can see why they're different. Don't get me wrong. On one occasion, it's clear that it must be released to the public at all costs. And on the other occasion, which and remember, the result of the months and months of investigations and sitting these people down and asking them questions and requesting documents, the result of that is just buzzwords and talking points by the Republicans, and it has no bearing on the future whatsoever. I mean, it's just crap. It's just literally crap. So you don't have to worry about it. Nothing to see here. That's why it shouldn't be released. Because there's nothing to it. There's no story here. It's just talking points. Which is why it's the end of democracy if it gets released. Please.
Are you prepared to subpoena those tapes, subpoena those notes?
I think Congress will need to subpoena them if indeed they're not provided voluntarily. I certainly support that.
Again, we can't have things coming out. We can't subpoena documents. That's bad. If they don't provide them voluntarily, that's bad.
I think there are many committees that will. We've seen already Jason Chaffetz on the Government Reform Committee call for that information to be provided and threaten to subpoena it if necessary. So Congress really needs to get to the bottom of this. I think there are enough credible allegations now of an effort to potentially impede or obstruct the investigation that this needs a very serious investigation just on that issue.
Is there anything preventing Director Comey, former Director Comey, from coming to Congress right now?
Nothing at all. And I'm quite sure that's going to happen. I have to imagine that he will want to explain just what took place.
He did. It was. I remember. Do you guys remember the day of the Comey hearing? Do you remember around Washington? I remember seeing pictures of all of these bars like filled. Obviously, in DC, there's a lot of like government workers and stuff. A lot of sick days that day, apparently, and the bars were chock-a-block full, and everyone was watching James Comey. Do you remember? This is it. This is the end. James Comey is going to end it all, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to end Trump as we know it. The memo has to get out there. The truth must be heard. The people demand to know. It's not the same thing, though. Let's be fair. It's not the same thing.
Those conversations are as they were reported. The country really needs to know about it. If the
country
president
needs
is
to know,
affirmatively
Adam.
trying to interfere in this investigation, that's something that has to be brought out and investigated by Congress. And of course, we have some powerful evidence, at least reportedly, in the form of contemporaneous notes taken by the director of the FBI.
Yeah. He basically said Trump cucked him, says back to his fund. What a liar. We have some powerful evidence, some notes taken by James Comey. Powerful.
Those could be very powerful evidence.
And you've got a series of allegations. The January dinner.
See, powerful evidence needs to be put out ASAP, even though it was written by one guy on the back of a handkerchief after a dinner meeting. That needs to be put out. People need to know. The result of months of House intelligence investigations where all of the relevant people were sat down and grilled for hours on end and asked to provide documents which they didn't provide and which were later subpoenaed. That's just talking points. That's nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Just boiled down partisan talking points. So, relax, right? Relax. It's all going to be okay. It's all going to be fine. There's no story. It's just talking points. Everyone get over it.